Hello everyone, I am your storyteller tonight, and I am so happy to be with you. In this quiet moment, I know that many of you are watching this video to relax or to have a good night's sleep after a long day. If you like stories like this, then don't. Forget to hit the subscribe button so there is always a voice to lull you to sleep easily. Now, let's get started. Oh Mother, please send my father across. It was all a dream. Merle's breath, like rotten fish on top of her tongue. The balled up, gray, dead mass of it settled at the back of her throat, like stale phlegm. His beady, stained tongue wriggling around on top of her tongue. His hand under her blouse, fumbling, scratching. His nails yellow and black and green, the sight of which made her vomit. His puss-filled, bandaged hand on top of her breast, the nail digging into her nipple, the dirt in his nails mixing with her blood. In her blood, the blood cool in the thick heat of the dark room, sweet, mixing with the scent of the vomit dried on the floor. She had dreamt it in the night, writhing like a dying fish, a pool of yellow sweat, unable to scream for all the phlegm in her throat, the fat tongue in her mouth, the eyes in the window. The eyes were from a long ago dream, black, a darkness darker than the black heat of the room, a self-eating darkness, turning inwards, two holes in the dark, like the memory of the snake's fangs on Amma's black skin. Two eyes watching her, watching itself. Two eyes like holes in the heat. She could slip away like vapor, like smoke, like the silver mist over the river. The river, black in the night, black and shining, winking like the silt around it, silver and loose, a million glinting eyes winking in the black night, the air ripe with the sour promise of raw mangoes, teasing and winking from the branches. Among them, the glinting brown eyes, cat-like of Muna, sitting on the branch naked, his long, cat-like body shining fluorescent, blue and violet, in the dark night. Ladki, he whispered to her, want a mango? His words tinged with the stale scent of a biedi, fishy. In the river, there were fishes as small as a dot, dark and invisible, holes in the river, moving eyes. The big fish did not swim. They stared at her, their mouths sending a bubble up the surface of the water, which burst with a quiet pop, waiting for her answer. Pop, 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 Munia, she asked. Not ripe yet, Muna said, and laughed, revealing a scurvy mouth with wiggling teeth, like maggots. With each shake of the shoulder, a ha up and a he down. The teeth dropped down, raining raining like mangoes, too impatient, too ripe and restless, dropping with a pop, pop, pop as they dropped and popped down. The night black rats gathered them up and scuttled away. An undulating, shadowy tide, whispering, an underground, mousy susurrus, like the restrained gossip, sisak, sisak, of the leaves in the night wind, conspiring. Amma had said it was rubbish, that the aam tree was spiritless, spirits having no cravings for the mango. It was all make-believe, just whispers, conspiring. But this changed when she saw Muna's body, the penis chopped off, dangling from the tree. And now he was sitting beside it, kicking it absent-mindedly once in a while, so that it went swinging, a sawan swing scene. Munia began to sing now, bellowing in the night, quiet. Amma, mere baba ko bhejori, ki sawan aya. Mother, please send my father across. Now the rains have come. And with her voice, the rains came down, quiet at first, trickling down her forehead, down her back, like sweat, mixing with the sweat into a vaporous headache. But soon, as Munia's bellowing grew more hysterical, stretched and cracked, the rain gained violence, sheets after sheets crashing down on the earth. Dum 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 da dum da dum dum. There was no song in this rain, nothing sacred, no rhythm, no melody. It was the roar of primeval war drums, the shanknad breaking out of the sky's raging core, bloodthirsty, furious. The mango trees were screaming in anguish as their branches convulsed, epileptic, suicidal, wanting to break free. But the roots unyielding, circling tighter and tighter around their ankles, cutting off the blood, then cutting into the skin, circling tighter and tighter till they were bleeding. They were bleeding and screaming. Their blood washed out by the rain. The earth was bleeding. Pools of blood, pools of filth running down the mango grove, running down the fields, running down the streets, running down to the river, running down. She looked at Muna, hanging on to the branch, swinging in the rain, the noose getting tighter and tighter, choking, screaming out into the rain. Amma, mere baya ko bejori. She knew that the flow of the dream, the black river, with the pop-pop fish, with the mango carcasses, with the winking stars in its belligerent waters, was running down to the void, the shunya that was inside her, the void that she was made to cover with her sari and petticoat, her red bangles and black bindi, the red dye on her feet, and the toe rings which cut into her skin, the shunya that was a red field, with Amma's corpse lying among the bent-down barley, the teeth-girdled void inside her stomach, as she watched her running towards the mango grove in her shit-stained sari, the blouse torn off, running to the branch that was no longer weighed down by Muna's incomplete body, the void that no Baba, no Bhai, no Mama could cross, a bottomless pit. What could Sawan do? The Shunya spelled out by the noose around Muna's neck. The Shunya Murli was trying to prod with his puss-filled fingers and his puss-filled organ. The Shunya that was a dream, the void that was this dream that was a void, flowing, rushing down into the night, to where the black river came to a halt at the dried-up vomit puddle, out of which she emerged into the dark room once again. Her body felt slimy, putrid, a mix of semi-digested rice, sweat, and the rotten substance of death. Murli's hands pressed tight around her neck, and her neck gave away, turning to sludge. Murli bent down and licked it up, his tongue abrasive, spiky, leaving scars for flies to lay their eggs on. Her breath started to go, and she could hear the thrashing of her heart in her ear, but she repeated to the beat of her thumping heart, "It is all a dream. A dream, a dream." It was all a dream. But it wasn't hers alone. It also belonged to Amma. It was a dream passed on to her, the only dowry Amma could muster, her inheritance. The dream belonged to Muna too. It was the dream that Amma spun out in the thick heat of the dark room, spinning and spinning. The thread of her word laced with her saliva, the strings of saliva that would purse her lips as she kept mumbling in the dark, spinning, her words indecipherable, a chant, a plea crying out into the night. Muna, Muna Munia Munia. It was the dream that Amma had spun out in the dark night, as the man whom they never called Baba filled the air of the room, humid with his sweaty appetite, heavy with his piggish grunts, filled it with the scent of his bidi, which would make Munia sick, filled it with the sight of gray tufts of hair pushing out of his ears, filled it with a heaviness that sat in their stomachs for days, stones in their chests, gray, a shame that stalked them and enwrapped them, entered their bodies, evacuated their innards, rendered their guts hollow, an all-consuming parasite, till they were all sludge, putrid and shameful, wobbly and shapeless, shadows, shunya, the dream that rose above this scent, these sounds, this heaviness, a light, weightless dream that her eyes caught a glimpse of as she had stood there watching, her two eyes glinting in the window. Outside the window, Munaya and her counting the teeth that they had found this week, buried in the silt around the river, buried in the sand like shells, hollow, heavy with the weight of their own insouciance, their own lack, a self-inflicted negligence dropping out of mouths and scuttering around in the sand. Sometimes they found worms inside them, pink and white and sometimes green. They compared the shapes that they found. Munia claiming her finds to be sharper, while she rubbed hers against her thumb till it turned raw, certain of their supremacy. Sometimes she kept them in her mouth, swirled them around, the taste of dirt, metallic, sour. She sucked at them like at the stone of the Jaman. Now, Merle's teeth shifted around in her mouth, scuttling down her tongue into her throat, tasting of gutka and anger, scuttling down her body, digging, puncturing the skin, searching for the arteries. A group of 3 scuttled down and lodged into her vagina. And all she could think of was the teeth around the river and the necklace of teeth Munia made for Amma, the same necklace which she ate 1 tooth a time after each meal, her self-prescribed medicine. Outside the window, Munia and she were watching her with a gray feeling in the pit of their stomach, as Merle laid claim to each part of her body and signed it off with the mixture of her own blood and his own dirt. Outside the window, Munia and she became 2 eyes, superimposed, simultaneous. One, a palimpsest of dreams and bodies and voids and eyes, melted into one. He and her, she and him, her and her, peering in at her mother and her mother, dreaming, drifting out of the window through the holes their eyes burned through the darkness, peering in at herself, the dream of I, Amma, Munia, breathing in the dark. Our bellies swell out in a rhythm, up, down, up, down. Munia is not Muna now. She won't be Muna again till morning. When morning comes, she will have to leave herself beside me, wrapped up neatly on the pillow, leave this dream that Amma has spun for us, and cross the shore. But it is still night now. Amma is telling us the story of a king who lost all his kingdom, all of whose children died at his own hand by some cruel accident of fate, all of whose wives died of grief, all of whose citizens died of the plague, and all of whose army died at war. Now, what could such a man do in this world? He wandered around the ghost of his kingdom, dreaming. Munaya and I do not believe this story. We contend that such a man should die, would die. And can't death be a dream? Amma asks. I wake up. Merle is shaking. He is done. He turns around and goes off to sleep. I look out of the window. The sun has started to come up. I repeat to myself, it is all a dream, a dream, a dream. Feast. It's 2 a.m. Cassie's mournful dirge drifts up from the pantry. I lie in bed, staring at the moonlight through the open window, exhausted from the absence of sleep, pondering whether tonight is the night I start to set boundaries, feign ignorance to my daughter's call for attention, or go downstairs to take care of her needs, as I have done every night since she died. The illuminated hands of the clock read 2:30 a.m. by the time she falls silent. For a moment, hope offers me its hand. Has the torment finally ended? Is peace now mine? A drumbeat pounds in my ears. Nerves fire off insurgent tension, and 2:45 a.m. is the time I begin to believe she has quietened for the night. I close my eyes, breathe in, breathe out. Unfamiliar calm trickles in. At the point sleep beckons, a sudden thunder crash of rage shakes my bed, and I hear Cassie howl like a banshee. Hope withdrawn, I throw off the duvet, slide my feet into cold slippers, and head downstairs on a silent prayer for Cassie to be gone by the time I open the pantry door. But she's there, on top of the refrigerator, like a mound of meringue, all folds and as white as freshly fallen snow. The silver heart charm that dangled from her wrist in life still in place. Her shadowy eyes are red and swollen. Her pudgy hands reach out to grasp the air. "About time," she wails, a repeat of what she says to me every night. I sigh, rub my sore eyes. "Sorry, sweetie. I was trying to sleep. It's almost 3 a.m. You do realize that?" A flash of times past when Cassie, a toddler, would creep into my room in the early hours to tell me she had been calling out for help in the bathroom, and would I come with her right now, because she really needed to go. Me chastising her as I chastise her now. I shrug. Then again, you're a spirit, so maybe you don't. A moan bubbles, bursts up from her insides. The pitch is ear-splitting. I am forced to cover my ears. "Do you realize how long I've been waiting?" she says. "Are you trying to starve me all over again?" She drags out the word starve. It stokes my guilt, and in my exhaustion, I want to laugh hysterically. I open the fridge door, bury the sarcastic smile playing on my lips amidst the piles of food on the shelves. Cream-filled pastries, trifles, cooked sausages, and bacon. Chocolate muffins topped with swirly icing domes. A foodie's paradise. But the sight makes me balk. Food dominated Cassie's 19-year lifespan. Mine, too. I cannot believe it dominates her in death. "What would you like, Cassie?" There's lots to choose from. How about, before I can finish, her yelling bounces off the pantry walls. Anything. Just give me anything. I need to feed, and you're frittering away precious time asking me what I'd like. I take out the plate of sausages. In those first few weeks, she showed up. I took the time to place them in a bread roll, slather on ketchup and mustard to make it look appealing. I don't bother with the presentation now. Instead, I throw them into her open mouth as if I'm feeding a ravenous, feral dog. She doesn't chew. I'm not sure ghosts have the ability, but gulps them down in an instant. I see them slip through her transparent, organ-free form. It's like watching a medical scan in real time. They leave her as they went in, whole, unchewed, undigested, splatting to the floor. I follow with the cakes and trifles. Watch my spirit daughter gorge only to cry for more. I take the dustpan and brush, sweep up the mess, pour it back into her, and this is the cycle, pending her being satiated enough to cease her demands. Once the cycle stops and Cassie is soothed, I'll clean up, throw it all in the bin. It'll be far too mushy by then to save. Besides, it soon stinks the place out. Then I'll sit a while, talk to her about anything and nothing until those shadowy eyes of hers close and she falls silent for the rest of the night. I share some blame for Cassie's current state and for how her life turned out. Weighing in at a hefty 13 pounds after a pregnancy sustained purely by chocolate bars, the only food my constantly nauseous stomach wouldn't eject. Cassie suckled the entire first night. Such was her voracious demands, until I was too sore for her to touch me. A bout of mastitis sealed the deal to move her onto bottle feeds. We'll see if she's meant to be this big, the health visitor said. You're only a small build, so maybe she'll slow down. Cassie did slow down, but I wasn't worried. Children grow at different paces. She possessed a healthy appetite, cleaning every morsel from her plate, and more. An active child, she remained slim, but followed her centiles, a term used by health professionals. Listening to the mothers at the school gates, fraught with their fussy eaters, I admit to feeling smug. Then, one day, karma bit me for my arrogance. Cassie stopped eating. Her personality changed. She was having trouble with her friends, bullying, her teachers said. A phase, I thought. But after 6 months, it dawned that this was no phase. Something far more serious was at play. Cassie is 10 years old and weighs what a child half her age should weigh. How long has she been experiencing problems with food? The doctor gazed at me with sympathetic eyes as he spoke. I was grateful for it. It made a change from the critical glances I had become used to. I took Cassie's hand, gave it a reassuring squeeze. She pulled away. A fierce scowl that said, "You are a lying bitch," came my way. She had gone through the surgery door under false pretense, that of holiday vaccines, to go somewhere exotic. I had said it with my face set in stone, so she didn't suspect. I risked paying a heavy price for inventing such a whopper. But by then, I'd have done and said anything if it meant getting Cassie help. Since summer, so 6 or 7 months maybe, I replied. She didn't like the way she looked in her swimsuit, said her thighs were too wobbly to be on show. I thought it would pass, only it hasn't. It's getting worse. I've been called to collect her from school several times because she's fainted. She gets breathless at the slightest exertion. Her bones jut out. She's pale and sleeps a lot. I'm really worried about her. I wanted to say I feared she'd die, but to say it could make it happen. So I kept it to myself. There's a risk of lifelong health problems if she doesn't start gaining weight. The doctor looked to Cassie. "Do you understand what is happening here, Cassie? You are very thin, and it's not good for you." Cassie stared at the floor, her arms crossed over her chest. The doctor sighed. "Let's see what help we can get for you, shall we?" We left the surgery. A prescription for supplementary feeds, iron pills, and vitamins stuffed in my pocket. A referral to child psychiatry on its way. Cassie sulked all the way home, shut herself away for several days without uttering a word to me. When she did finally show, her rage had stepped up a notch. "How dare you tell the doctor that I don't eat, Mom?" she yelled. "It is my business, not yours and not his." She stood in the middle of the kitchen, arms flailing, her tinny ribs visible beneath one of the close-fitting tops she insisted on wearing to display what she saw as a model figure. Cassie's glare cut me. I felt like the devil reincarnated. "You need help, sweetie. I've tried to do this on my own, but I'm lost now. I don't know what to do anymore. You're wasting away. I can't stand to see you like this." "Then don't look at me." Hands on hips, head thrust forward, a wild glint in her eyes. "Cassie, please don't. I only want to help, so shut up and leave me alone." She stomped off to her room. At the top of the stairs, she called out, "And just so you know, I will not see a doctor ever again." The door at the bottom of the stairs opened. As Cassie paced towards the kitchen, I was quick to hide the bottle labeled sugar-free lemonade I had refilled with a sugar-loaded version inside the refrigerator. Cassie was 15 at the time, skeletal, walking miles every day and night. She appeared in the kitchen door, layered up in clothing, a scarf and woolly hat, despite the heating being cranked so high I could barely breathe. "It's cold outside. They've forecast rain, too," I said. "Why don't we watch a film? I've bought some of that toffee popcorn and hazelnut chocolate you've always liked." Gray rings circled her eyes. Angry red spots shone from her cheeks. "Maybe later," she said, and turned to leave. "Be back by 1. It's clinic today. Don't forget." The front door slammed behind her. Despite her lack of response, I knew Cassie would return home in time for her weekly appointment. She had signed an agreement with the medics, one I knew she would not default on. In exchange for doctors pausing her forced admission to hospital, she would eat a little more, show up at the clinic every Friday to be weighed, have her bloods checked. We drove to the clinic that afternoon, Cassie staring out of her side window, me humming along to the radio. The sun had broken through the clouds, turning a gray day beautiful. Inside the clinic, Cassie disappeared with the nurse, only to return several moments later. An ecstatic grin on the nurse's face. "She's put on a whole kilogram since last week," the nurse announced. A glimmer of light shone. I began to see faith in that pivotal moment. Yet my faith would soon be shattered. The next morning, as laundry tossed in the washing machine, I heard a knock-knock coming from inside. I found nothing obvious when I emptied the machine, but when checking through the clothing, I felt small, hard lumps in the hems of Cassie's trousers, in the lining of the jacket she had worn the day previous, childlike stitching on the inner side. I picked it open. Pebbles fell on the floor. "You should have put her in the psychiatric hospital when you had the chance. They'd have sorted her out. They're the professionals, not you." Having chided me throughout this challenging time, my mother's unwanted advice didn't come as a surprise. "Cassie doesn't want to be in hospital, Mom." And I couldn't bear to think of her being force-fed, and that's what would happen. It would be purgatory for her. I'm sure she'd do something drastic, so she dies either way. Choking back tears, my feet barely touched the floor as I left the house, car keys in hand. I sped off down the road, not knowing where I was headed. I didn't return home for another 3 months. I woke from the induced coma 3 weeks after the car accident. Extensive surgical repairs to my left leg, from thigh to ankle, meant weeks of rehab and learning to walk again. By the time I returned home, Cassie had a slight prominence to her tummy, a rounder face, but she seemed downbeat, soulless. "There, you see?" My mother proudly paraded a plumper Cassie before me. "This is what happens when you set boundaries for your children and don't allow them to control you." I took Cassie's hands. "You look amazing, sweetie. So pretty." We hugged. I felt the meat on her bones, the warmth of her. She forced a smile, although darkness sat in her eyes. For the remainder of my mother's stay, I watched Cassie shovel her grandmother's meals into her mouth, mindless, not seeming to taste or enjoy what was going in. She tried to throw it all back up again when I first arrived, didn't you, dear? But I put a stop to that too, my mother announced. Cassie nodded. She didn't look up, said nothing, kept on like a robot loading her fork, filling her mouth. swallowing. I should have been happy she was eating. I wasn't. When I asked, neither Cassie nor my mother would elaborate on what went on between them during my absence. Cassie would shrug, remain tight-lipped. My mother would smile and say, "Proper parenting, dear." Only at Cassie's wake, 4 years later, did my mother offer her pious explanation. I broke her. That's what happened. I removed everything she liked. Her music, the TV, those awful childish coloring books you insisted on buying for her. I locked her inside the house so she couldn't exercise. I put a spoon to her mouth every damn meal until she caved and started to eat. No food, no reward. When she fought against me, I slapped her every minute of every day for the entire 3 months, never out of my sight. That's all it took to get Cassie back again. It's what you should have done, but no, you had to give in to her again. Now look where she is. She turned to look at Cassie's photograph on the mantel. Then she was gone. You didn't like me when I was thin. You don't like me now I'm fat, do you? Cassie asks. I sit opposite Cassie's ghost on a chair I've dragged from the dining room. I haven't yet cleaned up the food mess from the floor. I stare into the myriad colors and textures. I've always loved you, Cassie. I worried about you when you were too thin. It didn't mean I disliked you. The saucepan flying through the air, the bolognese within it spraying across the kitchen cabinets, plates smashed against the floor tiles in my desperation to see her eat. Never have I revealed this to Cassie, but these were the times I disliked her the most. I used to think you were a useless mother. Misery and wrath cross Cassie's face like a hologram changes when it is turned. Do you still think that? I ask. You didn't understand me. You were afraid to. Cassie's eyes meet mine. I see the depth of her melancholy. An infinite, darkened pool. She is distant, forever out of reach, as she always was. Yet I failed to see it, failed to see why. A lump comes to my throat. I cannot swallow it down. I grab the dustpan and brush to clear away the debris from the floor. Next comes the mop, swishing back and forth until the dirty patch shines. Throughout, Cassie is silent, watching me work. Eventually, she breaks the peace. Do you miss me? I lean on the mop handle. I miss you dreadfully, Cassie. I just wish our time together had been different, happier, less of a fight, squeezing out the water from the mop. I wonder why Cassie's ghost did not return with the appearance she bore when she died. Emaciated, barely there. Was her ghostly bulk meant to taunt me? As if she reads my mind, she says, "You were only happy when I ate, when I was bigger." So she comes here looking like this because she thinks it's how I prefer to see her. I drop my head to hide the brimming tears. It doesn't make me happy to see you like this, to see you so sad. Not back then, and certainly not now. The tremble in my bones reverberates in my voice. Cassie judders. Her mountainous bulk ripples. Her face crumples as the wailing kicks in. The mop drops from my hand, and I move to take her in my arms, stopping in my tracks when I realize I cannot touch her, cannot feel her. It's okay, sweetie. You don't have to do this. Believe me, I'd rather you rest. Her crying fades out like the end of a song. She becomes still. You don't wish to see me again? Her question is but a whisper. I would give anything to see you again, but not like this, and not if it causes you pain. For the first time since she started showing up here, I see her spirit smile. 5 a.m. The night after, and the dusky sky is littered with glistening dots. A chill seeps in through the open window. I shudder, get up to close the window, and with the click of its handle, my sleepy brain registers that I have not been stirred to the sound of Cassie's dirge. I listen for her cries. Nothing except silence fills the house. I should climb into bed, thankful for the peace. Instead, I creep downstairs, each step tentative, not wanting to rouse her or set off her wailing. The pantry door opens with a creak. I step inside. Cassie is gone, but for her heart charm bracelet lying on the top of the refrigerator. I pick up the bracelet, place it around my wrist, feel her presence against my skin. It tells me she will not return here, that her haunting is done. I take the stairs, crawl into my bed. Instantly, I fall asleep. Cassie's heart charm gripped between my fingertips. Oh, unholy night! Iceland's winter festivities are a perfect excuse to feast and make merry, and I partake with an insatiable appetite. I adore the endless nights wandering abroad and relish chance encounters with hapless stragglers trudging home. They all laugh when I tell them, carol singings not to my taste, and chuckle when I say, choristers are delightful and sweet. But how their mirth dissolves as I envelop them in my cloak and whisper, what a toothsome treat you are. You're good enough to eat. I despise summer, like all cold-blooded creatures, preferring a catatonic sleep to roasting in the sun. Every autumn, I anticipate the evening when Ingvar disturbs my estivation, and I return to a nocturnal lifestyle. He disinters my casket from the family plot every year during the first week of December. It's a tradition my loyal retainer has followed for years, just like his father, and his father's father, ad infinitum. It's impossible to find reliable help these days. And so, despite Ingvar's poor social skills, I re-employ his services annually. Ingvar obeys my written orders to the letter on the pain of death. If not in this life, then his neck. Thwack, crunch, My mind basks in a dream state when Ingvar invades my solitude, hacking through the icebound earth above. Crake, skreek, I hear the shovel scrape debris off the wooden lid, and his doleful voice murmuring a tuneless refrain. The unsettling melody stirs my clouded mind like a moorland breeze whistling through gnarled branches. Its clashing dissonances offend my refined musical sensibilities and cause my heart to quiver and contract. Lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub, my constricted arteries dilate as Ingvar wrenches at the coffin nails with his claw hammer. His frenzied efforts cause minor explosions in the darkness, dusting the threadbare silk lining with clouds of grit. As Ingvar prizes open the ancient pine lid, my sensitive eyeballs roll upwards, avoiding the moon's inquisitive gaze. My rib cage twitches in a violent spasm as wheezing lung sacs inhale clean air. I choke and splutter before coughing out stale fumes that rasp my withered throat like a rusty file. With each heartbeat, blood churns throughout my aching body, carrying oxygen to every cell. It's always the most painful part of my awakening. Pins and needles prickle each desiccated sinew, and every limb screams as it receives life-giving fluid. The blood returns to the heart after delivering oxygen, and my mind explodes with predatory thoughts anew. My throbbing heart sends the blood to lungs that strain hard to collect more air. I reflux and retch a pint of sticky phlegm from deep down. Ingvar is used to this unsightly reaction and tends to the detritus with a clean cloth. His caring touch is delicate and professional, and his face is unflinching. He lacks any sentiment. This is his business. Ingvar had strict instructions prior to my exhumation. He was to source a flask of fresh blood by whatever means necessary. The task never varies, but the source depends whereabouts I resume my existence. We're never in the same town twice, for obvious reasons. He's learned to adapt to my circumstances with undeniable efficiency. Ingvar has my best interests at heart, and he's also on the payroll. This winter season, he's moored our vessel in a quiet northwestern harbor outside Sudavik. It's an unassuming fishing town with a medical center and a venue for blood donors. Once on shore, he disguised himself and liberated a quart from their supply. It's a rich-looking concoction that will suffice for now. However, it's not the same as sinking my teeth into a warm jugular and slurping on the real deal. Ingvar steadies my quivering hands as I raise the glass container to my lips. I close my weary eyelids, and after a few sips, everything calms down. My sweaty palms dry out, and my prune-like fingers appear to elongate as my skin tightens. The sagging flesh under my jaw disappears, and my furrowed brow loses its careworn lines. At last, the throbbing pain behind my eyeballs dissipates, and my labored breathing settles into a regular rhythm. My once erratic heart beat chugs at a steady rate, and the queasiness in my stomach eases after a discharge of rancid gas. My rejuvenation is complete, and I rise from the coffin to assume my full height, like a magnificent butterfly casting off its shriveled chrysalis and unfurling its wings before flight. I nod at my retainer, and he tips his forelock and bows. I acknowledge his endeavors with a satisfied smile and survey the snowbound nightscape, glistening like an ocean of diamonds under the moon's bashful glow. Ingvar wafts his left hand through the air, shepherding me towards the waiting brougham with his outstretched right arm. Two majestic black drays snort white plumes from flared nostrils beside my handsome carriage. We take our seats as pristine snowflakes descend and settle on the bodywork's polished ebony. It's a fine welcome and a tremendous relief to be undead once more. The sight of my baleful old vehicle cantering through the small coastal town of Sudavik draws little attention. In previous years, the ominous rumble of hooves and creaking coach springs would herald an unfamiliar guest. But the inhabitants have other issues this year. They've entombed themselves within their homes, battened down their pine window shutters, and laced their thresholds with wreaths of protective herbs, ensuring plenty of garlics on hand. It should flatter me they fear the visit of a malevolent nocturnal predator. However, the precautions aren't for my sole benefit. The coronavirus's arrival has influenced behavior, and the government has enforced a lockdown. Ingvar understood there were unusual circumstances this year, but thought it prudent to interrupt my deep slumbers regardless. My initial reaction was one of joy. What better return could I expect than to discover piles of bodies waiting to be devoured? However, it transpires that the Health and Safety Department has issued an edict. Local undertakers are to dispose of the corpses through the crematorium. The local council is determined to sanitize the town and cleanse the region. I hadn't connected the hazy fug lingering above the coastline with the current climate of dread. Sudavik's furnaces are working overtime to dispose of the deceased. The impact on my festive plans is catastrophic. Citizens locked away in their homes until further notice. No bodies languishing on mortuary slabs waiting for morticians, and funerals performed in secrecy with the bereaved attending by Zoom. None of these scenarios bode well for a creature of my particular inclinations. I'll need to redraft Ingvar's commands with caveats that cater to similar events. A do not resuscitate clause should cover matters in the future. As for now, we'll retreat to the mountains, and I'll ponder the options. Iceland's 13 days of celebrations leading up to Christmas are a disaster for all the residents. Children won't be leaving shoes beside their open bedroom windows. There'll be no trolls gifting trick-or-treats this year. The authorities have banned the Yule lads' nightly visits. It's a bleak prospect all round. I have some tough decisions to make as we ascend to my mountaintop fortress. Most years, I'd prowl along local shores, searching for lonesome visitors and lost souls. My spirit descends into a quagmire as I contemplate the prospect of scouring isolated fjords for bilious vagrants and ill-kempt vagabonds. It seems unlikely that I'll quench my thirst this winter. The locals have barricaded themselves in their homes, and according to Ingvar, they're low on stock at the blood bank. As the days trickle past, the wind howls like a wounded banshee, and the ground hardens to rock. The snows gather in drifts, blocking our descent and jeopardizing my strategic movements. Ingvar spends his days grooming the horses, and at night he sips his supplies of Brennivin. Most evenings he passes out from its effects, having buried himself under a mountain of furs. He knows his services are not required during these hard times, despite being primed to chauffeur me down the mountain on a whim. I've endured centuries of this existence. Life is relative, of course. It isn't a life most know. It's punishment for cheating death. Centuries of endless torture in purgatory. I'm cursed to roam forever, fearful of daylight, and all for a few drops of blood. I suppose it could be worse. There's a contagious disease in the vicinity. I guess it'd just be my luck if I contracted the coronavirus, wouldn't it? A year of coughing and wheezing inside my casket is inconceivable. The thought is most unappealing. And so, it's time to call it a night. Ingvar must enter my coffin until the epidemic's over. Maybe my luck will improve next year. The Pinch ELCV 28, Earth's last chance vessel 28, was slowing down after 5 months at elevated distance speed. The 3-person crew were starting to feel the pinch. The pinch, as it had become known, was the phenomenon whereby the greater the distance from Earth, the more the human heart and brain would become panicked, fatigued, strained, and lost, as though there was an invisible bungee attaching everyone's core to the planet. There wasn't yet an acceptable scientific explanation for this effect. But the crew of the ELC-28 were really feeling it. They had just crossed the 960 million kilometers from the Earth, heading perpendicular to the gravitational rotation of the solar system. "It's always worse going south," Carl said with a smirk, looking across the table at 2 distraught faces. "What do you mean, south?" Casper said angrily. "There is no south, north, east, west. Just black, black everywhere. Listen, I've been through this 7 times, Carl said, trying to keep his cool and maintain a sense of leadership. "And that's another thing," Pearl said, getting drawn in by Casper's outrage. "How can this be the last chance if there were already 27 previous last chances that have failed?" The Earth's last chance missions had been funded globally and quickly established as the best chance of survival for the human race. Every nation had poured all of their resources and remaining workforce into it. Since it had been scientifically established 50 years prior that humanity would not survive much beyond 3397 on its current trajectory without finding another safe, inhabitable planet or a source of infinitely extractable energy. It was a question that had floated between Casper and Pearl for some time now. What had happened to the previous 27? And how had Carl come back every time? The first 15 ELC missions had been manned by larger and more experienced crews. By the 20th, there was no time to train anyone to the standard that was required. By this point, people were mandatorily encouraged to join a crew in a variety of ways. Shorter prison sentences, the promise of financial security for their extended family, and the knowledge they may be helping the survival of the human race as a whole. But it was becoming ever harder to recruit new people. Pearl was a space cadet in her 20s before the sudden, unexpected, and overwhelming societal dread. Now she wanted to volunteer in the hopes her kids might survive. Casper had some experience as an astronaut before being forcibly ejected after jeopardizing a mission due to drug use aboard the ship 5 years prior. He had been court-martialed, but promised a complete pardon if he volunteered for the ELC missions. "Think yourselves lucky," Carl said. "The first 3 missions I was on had 10-person crews, then 6. Now we're down to 3. It's much easier this way. More food, more room. All we have to do now is locate the BL hip and choose who's going in first." The BL hip, black hole with inversion potential, was a discovery made in the year 2868. A micro black hole, less than 300 microns in diameter, could, with the right equipment, be inverted to create a temporary door in space, which could theoretically lead anywhere. The hardest part was locating the BLH ups. The ELCV-28 was the furthest any ELC had had to travel so far, and it was understood that the effect of the pinch could be life-threatening beyond 1,000 million km. The first attempt to send anything through a BLA chip in 2950 was an automated sensor-packed bot. But the bots would only be able to communicate data back to the vessel for a maximum of 20 minutes before losing all connection. It was later deemed more cost-effective to attempt to send humans through, with the hope of reopening the door for them to return with any data collected. This was soon stopped after 5 failed missions, as it was believed inhumane. as the participants were never heard from again. After entering the BLA chip, until the recent determination of the definitive extinction of the human race. Do you ever go first? Casper said cynically. Well, no, not so far. Carl defensively shot back. Listen, like it or not, I am the captain on this ship. I have the most experience, and I'll have to be here to guide us home. Guide one of us home, Pearl said. Only you and one of us have any hope of making it home, right? When she said home, her voice cracked sorrowfully. Look, you have to fight the effects of the pinch. I know it's getting to us all, but if we let it, we'll end up like EL-CV9. And no one wants that. What happened on EL-CV9? Asked Casper. Let's just say they never made it to the BL hip, said Carl. The only reason I'm able to deal with the pinch is because I've done this so many times. I'm used to it now, and I know how to keep myself together. But rest assured, I'm feeling it too. This is the furthest I've been, and it's starting to put a strain on me. So you've never been in a BL hip? But you're happy to send us in, knowing we won't come back out, Pearl said, with a sense of righteous outrage. Oh, I've been in, Pearl, said Carl. Do you think they'd let me lead these missions if I'd never been in? And people come out all the time when there's nothing on the other side worth exploring. And if they're quick enough to realize that fact and get back through the BL hip before it closes. What was it like on the other side? Pearl asked skeptically. Black, just black, Carl said. Scanner deployment. The standard procedure is to send through a scanner bot to establish the chances of anything worth exploring before sending in a human. The data received back from the bots is usually minimal and often scrambled to the point that it's not 100% reliable. Then humans go through anyway. Okay, Casper, you can pilot the scanner. Just remember, the beam can only hold the BH lip open for 5 minutes, so get yourself perfectly lined up, Carl commanded. Casper sat facing the controls for the scanner and began maneuvering it into place. If I'm doing this part, that means I'm not the first one going in, right? Casper insisted. Afraid that's not how it works, Casp, Carl said firmly. The scanner was guided through the 5-meter hole in space. The hole that had opened wasn't black, as Casper and Pearl were expecting, but an iridescent glow of pink and purple. Beautiful and mesmerizing, yet somehow off-putting, like oil in a puddle. Pearl and Casper had returned to sitting in the recreational dining area of the ship, while Carl pored over the scanner results. After 45 minutes, Carl walked in. Okay, do you want the good news or the bad news? Carl said, smiling. What the hell does that mean? Casper reacted angrily. Keep a handle on the pinch, Carl said calmly. No need to start losing it over every little thing. Okay, the good news is there is a strong reading of biological and atmospheric conditions within an area reachable in a solo flight suit. The solo flight suits were designed for independent space travel, with built-in directable propulsion and terrestrial landing capability. They had a range of up to 190,000 kilometers in an open space, but don't have the power or propulsion to lift off once within the gravitational influence of a planet. "And the bad news?" asked Pearl. "The bad news is that one of you two is going to have to go in and try to reach it, and report back anything you find," Carl said glumly. "But not you?" Casper said, red in the face. "Casper, we've been through this," Carl said tiredly. "The important thing is that as soon as you touch down, you report back with as much information as you can gather. On your communicator, keep in mind you may only have minutes before the BL hip closes." "So who decides who goes in?" Pearl asks. "Well, I'll give you both 30 minutes. And if neither of you have decided, I'll decide," Carl said matter-of-factly. Carl left them both sitting across from each other at the dining table and retreated to the cockpit, keeping an ear out for any overreactive arguments. Carl knew that this was the time that anger had spilt over into violence in the past. His mind recollected the stories he'd heard about ELCV9 and shuddered. "Not on my watch," Carl thought to himself. "So do you want to go in first?" Pearl said, trying to maintain a tone of civil diplomacy. "I mean, let's face it, we're probably both going in eventually. I take it from your tone that you're not going to volunteer yourself, and that you want me to want to go in to alleviate your conscience," Casper responded calmly, but with an air of arrogance. "And next, I expect you'll bring up your children and talk about how much you would love to see them again, to try to guilt me into doing the right thing. Only the right thing, in this context, just happens to be the thing that you want." Casper's tone was becoming increasingly aggravated. "Fine, I'll go first," Pearl said. Carl, who'd been listening the whole time through the ship's wall, walked into the dining area with authority. "Okay, I've decided, Pearl. As Casper said, we both understand that you're probably desperate to see your kids again. But for that to happen, you will have to go in. And Casper, if Pearl goes in first, you will be right behind her, no matter what," Carl said, remembering his training. "Okay, fine. I'll go first," Casper said. "Good choice," Carl said, looking proudly at Casper. X first entry. Casper suited up and stepped out of the ship's airlock. Carl and Pearl watched from the cockpit window as he powered towards the glowing hole in space. They watched as Casper fearlessly approached and slipped through. "Are you hearing me, Casper?" Carl spoke into the ship's communicator. "What do you see?" "I can hear you all right," Casper said, with an excitable inflection. All sounds of the pinch had gone from his voice. "Woo! It's beautiful. What sort of planet is it?" Carl asked. Nothing came back from the communicator for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. "It's just like Carl heard eventually, followed by a long, drawn-out beep. "What did he say?" Pearl asked in an excitable tone. It's just like I... And then it cut off. Carl answered. Just like what? Pearls said, frustrated. I don't know. Carl responded. Let's listen to it back again. Carl replayed the message. It's just like Ira came out of the machine. Pearl said, puzzled. What? Recognize? Remember? You're going to have to go in after him, Pearl, Carl said, looking back at her. And you'll follow, right? Pearl said pleadingly. Of course, I'm not going to miss another opportunity, Carl said. What does that mean? Pearl asked, frowning. It wasn't just black, the one you went through. Was it Carl? You were just too afraid to make landfall because you knew that would be a one-way ticket. Carl looked down, ashamed. It wasn't as simple as that, Carl said. There are lots of planets that can come back with breathable atmospheres on the scanners. But when people go through, it's a death trap. The one I saw when I went through was not right. The sky was orange, and the land was black. I knew straight away that if I touched down, I'd never be coming back. So you were scared, Pearl scoffed. And yet you've sent plenty of scared people to their deaths. How do you know this one will be any different? And yet you are more than happy to send me through. Casper said, It's beautiful. Do you think he would have said that if it didn't at least look safe? Carl said encouragingly. The BL hip will stay open long enough for you to establish a connection with Casper. He should have made landfall by now if it's safe. And you'll know if you should turn back. And you can come straight back through. Landfall. With that, Pearl suited up and reluctantly entered. Carl sat waiting, watching, and trying to calculate how long it might take for Pearl to communicate with Casper, and how long he'd have before the BL hip would close. Anything from Casper? Carl asked nervously through the communicator. Is he alive? A long pause. Wait, he's talking, Pearl said. He's ranting and raving. I can barely make it out. Another long pause. He says it's Ert, Pearl said. With that, the BL hip closed suddenly. Carl sunk his head into his hands in despair. It's Earth? Carl thought. Was that what Casper was saying? It can't be. There are no BL hips that close to Earth. I would know. Unless one has formed since we've been traveling. Or maybe a new BL hip is created when we travel, though? Nobody knows for sure. Carl thought. He sat and dwelled on this new information for some time. He could wait for Pearl to make landfall, then travel through. But if Casper was wrong, then he, Pearl, and the ship would all be lost. And if he was right, and it was, in fact, Earth, all that's been achieved is finding a shortcut back home. Still would have lost the ship, and the Earth would still be on a collision course with annihilation. But at least he would have proven himself courageous enough to follow the crew through a BL hip, or he could open the BL hip right now in the hopes he could at least save Pearl before she attempts to land. But save her how? We're all dead either way. If I bring her back on board, we'll just head back to Earth with no confirmed news of salvation. Carl was distraught and angry with his inability to think clearly. He was supposed to be the one to keep a clear head and make firm decisions. Damn pinch, Carl thought. Carl opens the BL hip and tries to establish a connection with Pearl on the communicator. It's taking too long, Carl thinks. Suddenly, he can hear Pearl's breathing coming through. Pearl, how far are you from landfall? There's not much time. Carl shouts through the mic quickly. I'm within the gravitational pull now, Pearl says excitedly. Casper's on the ground and he's breathing without his suit. He says it's safe. Send a message home. Carl quickly uses the onboard computer to send a message back to Earth. This is ELCV-28. We've found a new home, location details included. Begin the evacuation process. Carl hits send and prays that was the right decision. He climbs into his suit and heads towards the BLH hip. This is it. He thinks. Carl gets through just as Pearl is making landfall. How was the descent? Carl asks. Fine. Not much in the way of clear landing areas. Pearl's responds. A lot of flora and fauna where I am. Flora and fauna? Carl says. That doesn't sound like the Earth I remember. Have you got a connection with Casper? No, his communicator cut off abruptly about a few seconds ago, Pearl said, concerned. I'm going to de-suit now. Carl tried to establish a connection with Casper, but nothing but static came through. How's the air? Carl asked. Clean. Weirdly clean, Pearl said, taking deep breaths. Carl was getting close to the inescapable gravitational pull of the planet. He soaked up the beauty of this vantage point. It looked like Earth, green land and sun and oceans. Carl couldn't contain his excitement, but something was different. Carl didn't recognize any of the continents. A scream pierced Carl's ears through his communicator. Then Pearl's voice came through panicked. Carl, turn back now. Get back to the ship and send another message to home. This is not Earth. This is not a safe planet. All that followed was screaming, the sounds of bones crunching, and a strange, savage, terrifying, deep roar. Carl checked the altimeter on his suit. Now entering inescapable gravity. The Roomba Facebook Marketplace. Roomba 600E. Details. Condition. Used like new. Description. Slightly used. Comes with all accessories and 2 chargers. Price. Negotiable. Need gone. ASAP. Christine kicked off her heels as soon as she walked through the door. The French baguette, peeking out of the brown paper bag in her hands, wobbled precariously as Sir Lancelot wove his way beneath her feet while she attempted to place the groceries on the bench. Lancelot was a Persian crossed with a rag doll, and the combination equated to hair. Lots of it. Christine scanned her critical eye over the apartment, clumps of fur wafted everywhere. She loved little Lancy immensely, but she didn't love his hair. She sighed as she opened the hall cupboard to get out her cumbersome Hoover, a relic that had belonged to her mother and had been passed down to her. It was time for its second workout of the day, and she just hoped the ancient beast was up for the task. The high-pitched groan was ominous, as was the smell of electrical burning that began moments after she had switched the machine on. Christine immediately disconnected the power and resigned herself to her fate. It was time to purchase a new vacuum. Unfortunately, her finances were still limited, and so she opened her phone to browse Facebook Marketplace. Surely she would find a deal there. It wasn't as if she was fussy. Anything that would work would be better than trying to sweep up the unsweepable. The price caught her eye first. Then the picture. A Roomba, a robot vacuum. Imagine coming home each day to a house that was freshly cleaned. No cat hair, no dust. The more she thought about it, the more Christine became convinced that she could not possibly live one more day without the services of her own personal Roomba robot. A quick series of messages back and forth, and soon Christine found herself the proud new owner of a second-hand robot vacuum. Be careful with the settings. It's a bit of a beast if you're not keeping an eye on it, the previous owner had advised her. She'd smiled and nodded, figuring that the internet would have all the instruction manuals and safety precautions listed somewhere. Once she plugged in the charging dock, Christine Googled the instructions and set the operating time to run twice a day while she was at work. With a happy sigh, she fed Lancy his dinner, reheated leftovers for herself, and went to bed. She was jolted awake at 4 a.m. by a soft mechanical whirring and solid, repeated thumps that shook her bed. Lancy, startled awake from his sleeping position at the foot of her bed, hissed violently as he landed on her chest, claws extended. It took her a bleary moment to connect the dots, but she finally realized she'd set the timer incorrectly, setting the machine to work at 4 a.m. instead of 4 p.m. It seemed to be stuck, trying to vacuum under her bed, catching itself repeatedly on the leg, and unable to navigate its way out of the situation. The bright lights, like little eyes, glinted with frustration, which echoed her own emotional state. It really was way too early for her to remember the settings, so she stumbled out of bed as she tried to whack the off button on the machine. It finally powered down with a petulant wheeze, the lights blinking off sadly. Placating Lancy took much longer, as his fur was literally on end. But after much stroking and coaxing, the cat settled back at the foot of the bed, curled up in a cat ball, and purred himself to sleep. The following morning, after feeding Lancy his breakfast, Christine studied the online manual closely as as she absently munched on toast and sipped her coffee. Carefully following the instructions, she set the timer, double-checking the AM/PM setting. From his sunny position on the windowsill, Lancey hissed and arched his back. A familiar whirring caught her attention, and a soft bumping nudged her toes. When she looked beneath the table, the Roomba was carefully vacuuming the crumbs she had spilled. "Odd," she muttered. "I haven't turned you on yet. Must be a saved setting from the previous owner." She didn't have time to look for the clear all settings section of the manual, but resolved to look into it after work. Once again, Christine was rudely awoken at 4 a.m. by the repeated thumping of the machine and the yowling hiss of the cat as Lancey landed claws first on her chest. "For the love of," she muttered, tossing her blanket aside to deal with the rogue machine. This time, the off button seemed to stick, and she was unable to power it down. "Well, if you won't switch off, you may as well do your job out here." Christine shoved the machine into the living room and firmly closed her bedroom door. Lancey would be all right for a couple of hours. She'd let him out for a kitty litter break as soon as the sun was up. The morning brought chaos. Christine's living room was spotlessly clean, immaculate even. But she couldn't find her shoes. She usually kicked them off by the front door, but they were nowhere to be seen. She rummaged under the sofa and coffee tables, just in case she had kicked them off in the living room, and then crawled into the dust bunnies under her bed, on the off chance they were there, but to no avail. Finally, she had to do a quick change of outfit so that she could wear the more casual loafers in the back of her wardrobe, and rushed out of the door, late for work. When she came home, Christine kicked off her shoes near the door as she juggled the bags of groceries she'd purchased after work. The light on the Roomba's dock was flashing, indicating that the dustbin needed emptying, so she dumped the heavier bags on the floor to attend to the task. When she lifted the lid, a mystery was solved. There, in shreds, were her lovely leather, high-heeled shoes. They'd obviously been caught by the Roomba overnight and had become a casualty of the cleaning machine. "At least there's a reasonable explanation," she sighed as she took the small dustbin to empty into the outside bin, happy that she wasn't losing her mind, but not happy about the cost of replacing her favorite shoes. When she returned, she cried out in alarm. The Roomba was stuck on the paper shopping bag, and its whirring brushes had opened a hole in the washing powder box. Fine white ponder was flying everywhere. "Oh, for the love of," she cried in exasperation as she extracted the paper bag from the maw of the machine. She set it to clean up the white laundry powder while she packed the rest of the groceries away. When she turned from the pantry, after putting the last item on the shelf, she nearly tripped over the Roomba that had silently moved its cleaning path right behind her, its lights blinking up at her like two besotted eyes. With a gasp, she stopped herself from falling, just in time by grabbing the fridge door with one hand and banging her other forearm hard on the kitchen bench. She cried out in pain, and she wrenched the freezer open to get an ice pack. Pressing the ice to her smarting injury, she trudged into the living room to rest and assess the damage. Hopefully, she hadn't broken anything. The skin was still intact, but she'd have a huge bruise tomorrow. No doubt. Lancey curled up next to her and purred as she scratched his head with one hand. She'd just relaxed enough for the shock and pain to wear off when the cat hissed and leapt from the couch. A soft whirring approached, and the Roomba trundled in, bumping gently into Christine's feet. "Goodness, you're more trouble than you're worth," she told the machine as she stood up to make herself some dinner and pour Lancey some kitty kibble into his food bowl. Christine shut her bedroom door that evening, determined to get a full night's sleep and not be woken by a marauding machine at an ungodly hour. She had to lock Lancey out, much to his disgust, as she didn't want him to lose access to his litter tray and have an accident in her bedroom. Her sleep was undisturbed, and she woke refreshed and ready to begin the day. In the kitchen, she noticed that Lancey had not finished his dinner last night. The bowl was still full of kibble. "Lancey? Here, kitty, kitty," she called as she opened a can of cat food. He was not around, sulking, most likely because she didn't let him sleep on her bed. "I'll leave it here for you then." She emptied the old kibble and replaced it with some tuna. As Christine ate her toast, she felt the whirring of little brushes bumping into her toes. So she lifted her feet to allow the Roomba to pass under the table on its morning cleanup rotation. She'd long since given up the idea of setting the machine to work when she was not home. It seemed to have a mind of its own and cleaned at all sorts of random times during the day. She didn't think much of the little trail of red on her foot when she put her loafers on, just brushed the smudge away. "Bye, Lancey," she called as she left for work. The cat was still sulking. Perhaps he'd be more cuddly when she got home. When she returned, her apartment smelt like rotting fish, and she gagged as she opened the door. The cat food was still sitting in the bowl uneaten, and flies were buzzing around the dish, along with a trail of ants. Quickly, Christine disposed of the food. "Lancey?" she crooned gently, and then again, more urgently. Perhaps the cat was unwell. The Roomba's light indicated a full dust bin, and Christine noticed the trail of ants marching up the side. She opened the lid and screamed. Blood and fur and pulverized viscera filled the bin. She ran to the bathroom and heaved, retching up the contents of her stomach as tears ran down her face. From behind her, there was a whirring sound, and the Roomba looked at her with its bright lights unblinking. Facebook Marketplace. Roomba 600E. Details. Condition. Used like new. Description: slightly used, comes with all accessories and 2 chargers. Price negotiable. Need gone ASAP. Frayed edges, Monday, 6:50 p.m. Sitting hunched over the scratched wooden surface of the desk in the corner of his room. Hideo Nakamura froze mid-brush stroke and stiffened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising up in response to the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he was being watched. He was home alone, had been for days. The house was deathly quiet, and the night was still. He'd been buried so deep in silent concentration while he practiced his kanji that he could have heard a moth flap its wings or a spider scuttle across the floor. Nobody, not a living, breathing soul, could have come down the hall, slid open his door, or entered his room without him noticing. Not a living, breathing soul. And yet, now he spun on his stool, expecting to find one, his breath caught in his throat as he came around and rose, arm up in readiness of defense. Calligraphy brush brandished like a weapon. Nobody was there, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave him. His room was small, just 8 tatami mats in size, and from where he stood to the wardrobe ahead was only a couple of paces. To his right, next to his desk, and flush against the wall, was a thin, uncomfortable mattress, which lay, without a base, flat on the floor. 3 of the bedroom walls, those to his left and right, and the one that held a curtained window behind him, were made of brick and plywood. The one ahead, which separated his room from the corridor, was a 2-panel traditional shoji, a latticework of bamboo in a wooden frame, covered with sheets of translucent paper. The outermost panel was on a track so it could slide, but it was closed now, the way he'd left it after entering the room. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, illuminating the room sufficiently. Apart from a few boxes full of textbooks and a rack on which sat some pairs of shoes, there was nothing in the room behind which anything that shouldn't have been there could have hidden. The only place any such thing could have been concealed was inside the wardrobe, which was built into the wall and sealed by another sliding door. It was this door that captured Hideo's attention. A second after he stood. Or, more specifically, it was the almond-shaped tear in the center-most paper panel, and the blackness beyond that his eyes came to rest on. The tear had been made a few days prior, when his feet got caught in the blankets as he hopped out of bed, causing him to stumble and plunge his thumb through the delicate paper. Ordinarily, this would have been a cause of concern for Hideo. But with his father away, there had been no need to panic. What his father didn't know couldn't turn him into that wrecking ball of rage Hideo had become all too familiar with since the passing of his mother. So it was a blessing he wasn't there to discover the damage. As minor as it was It would have pushed him over the edge, the way every slight inconvenience seemed to these days. His father's unpredictability had been growing steadily these past months, along with his dependency on alcohol, and Hideo could no longer anticipate when or where he might snap. They didn't speak much anymore, not even by text, and he had no idea how long this latest business trip might last. It might be days like the last one, or weeks like the one the time before. Whatever the case, he really did need to find time to repaper that shoji. For all he knew, his father could return that very evening, and that would mean trouble and bruises. If only he could fit it in around studying for his exams, practicing for the upcoming calligraphy contest his school had put him forward for, and training for the baseball league finals. All would be good, or at least as good as it could be. While walking on eggshells, an unexpected flicker of motion in the darkness behind the tear made Hideo jump, and he staggered, bumping into his seat and knocking it over. He didn't know what he'd seen, but he didn't hesitate in dropping his brush and snatching up the wooden stool in panic. Turning back towards the wardrobe, he half expected to find the door sliding open, or something hideous wriggling out through the hole. Instead, he found there was no longer darkness behind the tear, and he thought he could see the sleeve of his jacket. He creased his brow and took a step closer, squinting to peer through the hole. Yes, that was it. His white and blue baseball jacket, hanging where it always hung, in silence. And with that realization, he no longer felt he was being watched. Just my imagination, he thought, lowering the stool to the floor and catching his breath. Studying too hard, too much time alone in this empty house. Whatever he'd felt, whatever he'd thought, it was just a con of the senses. His mind playing tricks, telling him it was time to take a break. Deciding to do just that, Hideo picked up his brush, put it back on the desk, then made his way out of the room, heading down the hall to a lonely kitchen. Tuesday, 5:45 a.m., an hour before his phone alarm blared, he came alert, woken not by hunger pangs, nightmares about his father, or fears of being late for an exam, but by the horrible, goosebump-raising sensation of once again being intensely watched. In the dark, he fumbled on the floor for his phone, snatched it up when he found it, and jabbed it out into the room. The screen lit up with the press of a button, and he scanned it around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. His surroundings were illuminated only slightly, but it was enough for him to see that all looked normal. His door was shut, his curtains drawn, the light bulb dangled darkly. His desk, his stool, his boxes of books, and his shoes. Everything exactly as it should be. His hand stopped moving when the glow from his phone found the tear in the closed wardrobe. Shoji. There was a darkness beyond that was darker than that of his room and seemed to throb. Panic seized his chest, and he jumped up, casting off his blankets and the textbooks he'd fallen asleep with, and stepping forward, free hand searching for a cord above his head, tugging it when he found it to ignite the bulb. "Is somebody there?" he asked, dropping his phone on the mattress and advancing in his shorts towards the wardrobe. Don't be stupid, he thought. Of course nobody's there. How could anyone be there? It's just the wardrobe. He was at the door in a second, reaching out with one hand, slipping his fingers around the edge of the panel's wooden frame to slide it open. The light from the bulb rushed in, proving at once what he already knew, that there was nothing to discover within except dangling clothes, the smell of mothballs, and towers of folded blankets on the floor. The darkness, if it had been there to begin with, was gone now. The door had been opened, and Hideo stared in bewilderment. The wardrobe was void of evil, peeping entities, and he no longer sensed any presence. What is wrong with me? He wondered, wiping sweat from his brow as he slid the door shut. Why am I so on edge? Telling himself it had to be exam stress, performance anxiety, exhaustion, looming deadlines, fear of his father, grief over the loss of his mother, or some kind of mind-warping, paranoia-inducing combination of it all. He slid the door shut and returned to his mattress, switching off the light as he passed beneath it and crawling under the blankets to get more sleep. Wednesday, 7:58 p.m. The second he entered the room, sweaty in his mud-stained baseball uniform, aluminium bat resting lightly on one shoulder, he could sense the presence watching him again. Stopped in his tracks in mid-yawn, he spun to glare at the tear in the brittle square of paper. His ceiling light was on, as he'd left it, and though earlier it had shone into the hole, allowing him a glimpse of the clothes within, all he could see there now was darkness. His face flushed as his eyes probed the black as pitch nothing, which seemed to be staring at him. His blood ran cold, his heart thumped loud, a lump stuck firmly in his throat. "Who's there?" he said, voice trembling, fully convinced now someone was hiding in the wardrobe. "Whoever you are, you better come out. I've a baseball bat, and I'll use it." Not a sound came back in response. Not a whisper. Not a giggle. Not a growl. If it was a ghost, or a demon, or something otherworldly, haunting him and spying from beyond, it didn't play its tricks to established rules. If it was human, or a thing of flesh and bone, it didn't care. A jot it had been rumbled. Maybe it was because he'd just come home from training, and his body was pumped full of adrenaline. Maybe it was because the baseball bat felt powerful in his hands. Maybe it was just that he was sick of being weak and quaking before others like a baby. Whatever it was, Hideo forced down the lump in his throat and strode to the door, slamming it back and stepping through, brandishing his weapon in both hands. As before, there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found, and nothing to be seen other than undisturbed clothes on metal hangers and neatly folded blankets on the floor. He jabbed his bat forward into his shirts, slid them aside, checked every inch of the back wall. There was nothing. There was no one. It was empty. "This doesn't make sense," Hideo said, lowering his bat. He was inside the wardrobe fully, in the space between threshold and clothes. He decided he should examine the torn paper panel from this side, in case there was something he was missing. So he took hold of the sliding door and pulled it shut. Almost at once, a chill seemed to descend, and he felt like he'd entered a vacuum. It could only have been his imagination again, brought on by the uneasiness of the moment. So he forced the notion from his mind and told himself it wasn't as cold as he thought. "Is it you?" he asked, craning his neck to examine the frayed edges of the tear. "Are you mad because I ripped you? Are you trying to drive me insane?" There was no logical thought behind his words. A shoji panel couldn't feel anger, nor did it have the ability to haunt or stare, regardless of how old it might have been. And old it was, which was clear from its brittleness and discoloration. Who knew how many people had slept in this room and used this wardrobe? Who knew what this door might have seen had it only had eyes? Logic didn't seem to factor into the current situation, so Hideo thought nothing of it when it occurred to him the tear did look like an eye, and he suddenly had the urge to peer out through it. Slowly, carefully, he moved his face closer and positioned himself right behind the hole. Squeezing one eye shut, he squinted to see out through it, only to be punched in the gut by the shock of seeing someone on his stool, hunched over his desk, apparently writing. Terrified, Hideo spat the air from his lungs and fell back, dropping to crouch amongst the blankets. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to process what he'd seen. What the hell was that? Starting to question his sanity, and clutching his bat in both hands, he straightened back up and returned his eye to the hole. He had to have been mistaken. He couldn't have seen what he thought. It was impossible as the fact it was now somehow dark inside the room. Someone had switched off the light. The person who'd been sitting on his stool? He couldn't see much, but he could tell right away that person was gone. He could make out shapes in the darkness, like the stool and the desk and the mattress lying flat against the wall. There was something else, too. A large mound on the bed. And just as he realized what that was, a light blistered into life. A rectangular light he knew came from a phone. He was frozen, captivated by what he saw, unable to look away. He watched the rectangle of light rise and bob around the room like a ghostly lantern. He knew, before it happened, the ceiling light was going to come on, like he knew who'd be beneath it when it did. "Is somebody there?" he saw himself ask, before jerking his head away and shuffling back, burying himself deep in shirts and jackets. No, 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 no! He panicked, pressing himself back against the wall and clutching the bat to his chest. Eyes shut. He thought he heard the familiar swooshing sound of the shoji door opening. Impossible, he thought, squeezing his eyes so tightly shut he felt that they would burst. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be. Swoosh. Again. Then bang. And his eyes jerked open. Had the door opened and closed? Had someone peered inside? No. I'm imagining it. This can't be happening. It can't. The first time he'd felt like he was being watched, he'd been sitting at his desk drawing kanji. The second time he'd felt it, he'd been lying in bed, disturbed from a restless slumber. The third time had been just a few minutes before, when he'd entered his room and sensed the presence. And what had he done then, as completely immersed in this nightmare as he was? Hideo didn't believe the door would open again until it did. Nor did he believe a version of himself, a doppelganger, a demon, would step across the threshold and enter the wardrobe. But it did. It was dressed like him. It carried a baseball bat like him. It was dirty from sliding in mud like him. But it wasn't him, because he was there, shrinking back into the corner, watching it prod its bat into the clothes to sweep them aside. Steel hangers screeched along a tarnished metal rail like witches shrieking, and the noise cut right to his core. Just a minute ago, he'd done the same thing, examining the back of the wardrobe and finding nothing. This one wouldn't come away so empty-handed. This one was going to find him. And with that thought, that fear, that panic-inducing, life-threatening realization, Hideo acted. The scream surged from the depths of his being, and he pushed himself up and lunged forward, swinging his bat as he did, striking the shocked-looking doppelganger square in the face and knocking it out of the wardrobe. He didn't stop. The adrenaline coursing through his veins was electrifying. It made his body burn and flooded him with rage. This was a fight for survival, a battle to retain his place in the world, to protect his identity. And he couldn't let this phony Hideo hurt him, and so he hit it as it fell to the floor, again and again on the head, pounding it into submission, pummeling it brutally until the feeble, desperate cries it made fell silent, and its spasming, copycat limbs lay deathly still. He stood over it then, panting, wheezing, sweat dripping off his brow, blood dripping off his bat. He stared at the demon's battered face, found he was unable to focus on it, didn't want to. Instead, he examined the blood splatter that decorated the tatami mats around it. The patterns looked like kanji characters painted in thick, red ink. "Hideo, I'm home. Come say hello to your father." The shout that seemed to come from the kitchen at the bottom of the hall startled him, and he jerked his head to stare at the bedroom door. His father was home? Since when? He hadn't heard him enter. Had he been there all along? If so, what had he heard? And what would he say about the torn paper shoji, let alone the monster on the floor, wincing, afraid to see the mess he'd made, and the demon's caved-in face? He looked back down. There was nothing there. No doppelganger, no splatter, no kanji characters sketched in crimson blood. "Hideo, get your ass out here, boy!" Confused, panicked, Hideo caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shiny, polished surface of his bat, and shuddered when he didn't recognize it. It was his face. Of that, there was no doubt. But something was different. Something had changed. Something seemed missing from his eyes. That's when he noticed the bat wasn't covered in blood, but he knew that it could be. "I'm hungry, Hideo. Come and cook something. Don't make me go in and get you. There's no food in the house," he muttered, too quiet to be heard by anyone other than himself. "There's nothing in this house at all. Hideo!" He knew what it was now. Hideo! He knew what was missing from his eyes. Hideo! It was fear, and worry, and sorrow, grief, and loneliness, and hate. All of it gone, as if it had drained out of him, leaving just the one thing he had left: anger. "Coming!" he shouted back. Then he went out of his room to greet his father. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. Edgar Allan Poe, a belly full of apples. Well, explain to me what it was doing on the tree if I wasn't meant to eat it. I had a long, hard day, Adam. If you remember correctly, you were supposed to name all the animals with tails, while I handled the green ones. The next thing I know, you're passed out by the water circle, taking yet another one of your naps. That left me to come up with all those names, and by the time I was done, I was famished. The apple tree is the closest to the water hole, and that's why I picked an apple. It was convenient. I wasn't deliberately trying to disobey the Lord. After an exhausting day, I simply wanted whichever fruit I could get to first. Can you explain to me why God put the forbidden fruit so close to us and made it so red to draw our attention to it, and made it so tasty? Adam, if you could try an apple, you would never be the same. I cannot describe its delectability. You may as well try one now. We've already been cast out. It's not as though he's going to cast us out again. If you ask me, it's unbelievably rude of him to have us name every living creature on earth, put all the acceptable fruit out of reach, and then kick us out of the garden once all the tedious tasks are completed. He didn't even say thank you, not even a card expressing his thanks. I realize cards haven't been invented yet, but if he can create an entire universe in a few days, I think he can figure out a way to show gratitude. Don't you? Oh, stop crying, Adam. This place isn't so bad. Sure, it isn't paradise, but there are some plants with needles sticking out of them, and some lovely dust, and a lot of very interesting rocks. That one looks sharp. Be sure to never pick it up and drop it on anybody's head. Please cover yourself up. I don't know why, but for some reason, I can't stand the sight of you in all your nakedness. Shame. What's that? No, you know I don't listen when he talks. It's so loud and condescending. Do this, do that. Name this, worship me. Stop rolling your eyes at me, Eve, or I'll turn you back into a rib. It's all so boring. If any of it were all that vital to know, he'd write it down on a piece of stone. I suggested that to him once, and he pretended it was a bad recommendation. But secretly, I think he filed it away to use at a later date. The first time I see a rock with a rule on it, I'm going to look up at the sky and say, "Wow, who gave you that idea?" See if I don't. I'm not afraid of him, you know. You might be, but I'm not. I've barely had time to contemplate my own existence, so the threat of having my existence nullified is of no concern to me. Clearly, he doesn't want to get rid of us and start from scratch, or he would have done it already. No, he wants to teach us a lesson. He wants us to wander aimlessly for the remainder of our lives, cloaked in this thing called shame. I shall not. I refuse. I have nothing to be ashamed of, and I will not pretend that I do. A man makes a silly rule, and if the rule is broken, that does not make it any less silly. I don't care what sort of man it is. I don't care if you say God is not simply a man. He sounds like a man. And because he can sound any way he likes, that means he wants to sound like a man. We call him he, don't we? Then he is a man with made-up rules for living that I was never going to obey. I don't care if he hears me. Let him hear me. I am meant to spend the rest of my days surrounded by needle plants, and you, a man with one rib. I am meant to wear rags, because not wearing them makes me feel strange. I am meant to have children, I suppose, based on how disagreeable I am and how stupid you are. I can't imagine they'll be very endearing children. Once those children are here, I have no idea who they'll have children with, because it'll just be us. I guess that means once we die and our children die, that'll be the end of this nonsensical little experiment. Oh, but at least we named the giraffes first. A question for you, Adam. Since he isn't responding to us, why are we the only ones who can't eat the apples? I specifically saw a loud bird eating an apple the other day. Why weren't all the loud birds cast out of the garden? If a giraffe eats an apple, will it be thrown out of the garden? Why were we the only ones prohibited? Right, the knowledge. We're not meant to know anything. We're just meant to assign names, be fruitful, multiply, and praise him every chance we get. If we want knowledge, then it's out we go. Well, Adam, I choose to know. I choose to know things. Not just some things, but everything. Why create an entire world and then tell me I'm not allowed to know anything about it? I can't help but feel this was all some kind of test, and I will not be tested. Had I known that he was testing me, I would have eaten every apple on that tree. I would have stared up at him with the seeds falling out of my mouth, and I would have laughed. For if I am to go into exile, I am not going with an empty stomach. I will go with a belly full of apples. My only regret is that I stopped at one. I will not feel badly about you being punished for something I did either, because I have been punished many times over for you, for your laziness, for your superiority complex, for the way you smell at night when you are pressed up against me. It reeks so that I can barely sleep. Yet I have said nothing, because I have accepted that we are joined forever. You make strange noises in your sleep, but he never punished you for that. I took one bite, and we are damned. Be angry if you like, Adam, but do not expect me to worry myself over your anger. Your anger is your business. I will not make it mine. Last night, before he woke us with our punishment, I had a dream. I had a dream that all of this was submerged in water. Enough water to cover even the tops of the tallest trees. There were more people, lots more. They were running and screaming. Some were already drowned. In the distance, I could see a large boat, but it was too far away. I would never reach it in time. I would die alongside all these strangers. Instead, I lay myself down. I began to float, right up to the surface. I could still hear the wailing and the pleading all around me, but I was not making a sound. I simply laid like that on the surface of the water and let it take me wherever it wanted to go. Blackwood's Ewe Farm. Jenna wiped sweat from her forehead and surveyed the cluttered living room. Boxes labeled Kitchen, bedroom, studio equipment were scattered around. The high ceilings and dusty crown molding had a haunting charm, perfect for her next YouTube series. "All right, guys," Jenna said, adjusting her camera. "Welcome to Blackwood's U Farm, a place so haunted it's been empty for years. But you know me, here to bust some myths and find the truth." Jenna panned the camera around, capturing B-roll footage. "The plan is to document everything," she said, moving through the hallway. "We'll explore every nook and cranny. And if the ghosts won't come, we'll have to encourage them." Her viewers loved a good scare, even if it meant a bit of staging. Jenna was used to setting up convincing shots to keep her audience on edge. "This place is beautiful," Jenna said. "It's hard to believe nobody's lived here for years." She paused, her look a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jenna set her camera on the porch handrail. The evening light cast shadows across the wood as she zoomed in on the plaque reading Blackwood's U Farm. "Look at this," she said. "What's up with the weird capital letters?" She stepped back, ensuring the whole plaque was in the frame. "It's not just fancy font." She paused, letting the camera linger on the name. Jenna glanced around, noting the rocking chair and ivy framing the windows. A creak from behind made her jump. Spinning around, she saw nothing. Nervously, she turned back to the camera. "Well, that's creepy," she said. "This place certainly has atmosphere." She turned off the camera and walked into the house, footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. She set the camera on a tripod, framing the grand foyer behind her, and turned it back on. "All right, everyone," Jenna says. "Let's take a deeper look into Blackwood's U Farm." She panned the camera across the entryway, showing the chandelier, dusty portraits, and wide staircase. "Check out this staircase," she says, brushing the polished wood. Straight out of a Gothic novel. Jenna moved into the living room, aiming the camera at the fireplace. This fireplace must have seen countless winter nights. She walked in front of the camera and looked directly into it. Turns out, Blackwood's U Farm has a history. People say it's haunted, but you know me, I'm here to bust those myths. A soft creak echoed through the house, making Jenna's heart skip a beat. Perfect setting for our adventure, right? Jenna reached for her notebook. Built in early 1929 by John Blackwood. After the Blackwood family's mysterious disappearance, the house changed hands a few times, each owner left under strange circumstances. It's been empty for 20 years. Closing the book, she whispered, "Bad luck? Or something sinister?" She moved the tripod to the hallway in front of the basement door. She opened the door to the basement and pretended to peer down. "I'll save the basement for another day," Jenna says with a nervous laugh. Heading upstairs, Jenna showed the master bedroom with its large 4-poster bed and faded wallpaper. "This must have been beautiful in its day," she says. "I can't wait to fix it up. And the first thing to go is that ugly wallpaper. Finally, she climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. She pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside, her flashlight revealing stacks of old boxes and furniture. She panned the camera over the piles of furniture and forgotten relics covered in dust. "Looks like I've got my work cut out for me," she says, stepping carefully around the clutter. "But who knows? Maybe we'll find something interesting." Jenna approached a large wooden trunk in the corner, its surface scratched and worn. She knelt and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were old clothes, yellowed letters, and a leather-bound diary. She picked up the diary to show the camera. "Jackpot," Jenna said, eyes wide with excitement. She opened the diary, flipping through the brittle pages. "Margaret Blackwood, 1929, Jenna read aloud. "This could give us some insight into the history of the farm." She glanced at the camera. "I promise I'll read some of this later for you guys." She tucked the diary under her arm and continued exploring the attic, her camera capturing every dusty corner. "This place is like a time capsule," Jenna said. "All right, I think that's enough for today." She turned the camera back on herself. "I've got a lot of work to do up here. Stay tuned for more updates from Blackwood's Ewe Farm." Jenna sat on her bed, the diary in her lap. She opened it, finding mundane entries about the house's construction and moving in. But as she read on, the tone shifted. "November 15th, 1929, Jenna read. "Strange noises last night. Sounded like whispers. Couldn't sleep. December 2nd, 1929, Jenna read. "The whispers are getting louder. John thinks I'm imagining things." The next entry caught her eye, the handwriting shakier. "December 14th, 1929, she whispered. "Woke up to find all the doors open. John is missing. We're not alone. The children are terrified." Jenna's hands trembled as she turned the page. The final entry was short. The ink smudged. "December 15th, 1929, Jenna read. "Last night was the worst yet. Shadows in the darkness, cold hands on my skin. We must leave. If I could undo the wish that I made to get John to build it." The diary ended abruptly. Jenna closed the book, her mind racing. She had come to debunk myths, but now she wondered if she had taken on too much. She turned off the lamp and lay back on the bed. The house's creaks and moans amplified in the silence. Jenna pulled the covers up to her chin, her eyes wide as she stared into the darkness, unable to shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Jenna stirred in her sleep as faint, eerie sounds creeping into her dreams. A low, rhythmic tapping echoed through the house. She woke with a start, heart pounding, sweat dripping from her forehead. Jenna reached for her camera and flashlight instinctively, her pulse racing. What the? she whispered to herself, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. The tapping continued, louder and more insistent. "Okay, guys," Jenna said. Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced herself to sound composed. 3 o'clock. Some noises woke me out of bed. The floorboards creaked beneath her weight. The tapping echoed through the halls, setting her nerves on edge. "I'm going to check it out," Jenna said. "Wish me luck." She crept down the hallway, her flashlight illuminating the dust, motes floating in the air. The sound came from the attic. "Here goes nothing," Jenna muttered, placing a hand on the railing. Each step groaned under her weight. The attic door loomed before her, pushing it slowly, the hinges squealing in protest. The noise came from the far corner, behind a pile of debris. Jenna navigated the clutter, her camera held high. "This is creepy." As Jenna approached, the noise suddenly stopped. Scanning the area with her flashlight revealed nothing but cobwebs. "Nothing here," Jenna said, trembling. She lowered the camera, her breath coming in short gasps. The tapping didn't resume, the silence more unsettling than the noise. "Maybe it's just the house settling," Jenna said, more to herself. A cold breeze brushed past her, ruffling her hair and sending a shiver through her body. "Okay, that's enough for tonight," Jenna said shakily. Back to bed. At the bottom of the stairs, she glanced back up, half expecting to see someone staring at her. But there was nothing. Jenna set the camera down on her nightstand. She climbed back into bed, her mind racing. The house was old, full of noises, but this felt different. She tried to reassure herself, but the unease lingered. Jenna, eyes heavy with sleep, heard it again. Closer this time, different. A soft, dragging noise, like something being pulled across the floor. She sat up quickly, heart pounding, reaching for her camera. "Guys, it's happening again," Jenna said, pressing the record button. "It's around 4 o'clock in the morning." She swung the flashlight around, sweeping it across the room. She gasped as she noticed the old rocking chair in the corner, gently moving back and forth. She swallowed hard, the thrill of capturing something tangible. She quickly looked under the bed. "Nothing here," she said. But that chair moving, that was real. The noise returned from the hallway. She tiptoed to the door, every muscle tense as she turned the knob. The door swung open with a creak, revealing the dark corridor beyond. She aimed the flashlight down the corridor, the light struggling against the darkness. She crept to the staircase, her mind racing with explanations, each more unsettling than the last. As she reached the stairs, she paused, the sound now coming from below. "Here we go," she whispered, starting down the stairs. The main floor was cloaked in moving shadows as the flashlight washed over the furniture. "This is where it gets good," Jenna thought, her fear surely coming across as genuine to her viewers. This is exactly what they want. to see. She followed the noise to the kitchen, where the old cast-iron stove stood against the far wall. Jenna hesitated, her hand hovering over the stove's door handle. Jenna flung the door of the stove open. Inside, she found nothing but old ashes and cobwebs. The noise stopped abruptly. She turned the camera back on herself, trying to mask her relief with disappointment. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Jenna said. Jenna's mind churned. She couldn't debunk these sounds, and that worried her. There was no logical explanation, no draft or loose floorboard to blame. She headed back upstairs, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She'd pretended to have this experience so many times before on camera, and now was sickened by the fear. The next day, she decided to explore the basement, the part of the house she hadn't investigated. Clutching her camera, she silently slipped down the stairs. "All right, guys, heading to the basement," Jenna said. "Let's see if we can find these noises." Jenna jiggled the handrail along the steps. It wobbled slightly, but no noise came. The basement was a large, shadow-filled space, cluttered with old furniture and dust-caked boxes. The air was musty, carrying the scent of mildew. "This looks promising," Jenna said, aiming the camera at an old wooden door, its paint peeling. Pushing it open revealed a small room filled with old boxes and more debris. Stepping inside, her flashlight barely cut the darkness. The room, cold and stagnant, was disappointingly mostly empty. "Well," Jenna said, shakier than she intended as she panned the camera to the clutter. Her flashlight cast eerie shadows on the walls. "Let's see if we can find more clues." She pulled an old photo album from a box and flipped it open, revealing black and white images of the Blackwoods family, their sad eyes staring back at her. Suddenly, a loud bang came from the far corner where the shadows seemed darker and more menacing, making Jenna jump. "What the?" Jenna said, spinning around. She moved towards the door. Her breath came out in visible puffs as the temperature dropped sharply. She could see frost forming on the walls. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest, her fear mounting. Then she saw it. A large, dark figure standing just beyond the reach of her flashlight. It was tall, but obscured by the shadows. Jenna froze, unable to tear her eyes away. "Who are you?" The figure didn't respond. Jenna took a step back and turned to run, the door slamming shut. With a crash, Jenna tried the doorknob in vain. The figure began to move towards her. "You wanted ghosts," his voice hissed, "but instead you got demons. Be careful what you wish for." "Please," her voice broke. "Let me go." The figure laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the basement. "You wanted the truth," it said, "and now you have it." Jenna's blood ran cold. She stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. It was almost upon her, shifting and twisting in the dim light. She fumbled for her camera, wanting her viewers to see. As soon as the camera focused on him, it disappeared, leaving only an eerie shriek in the wake. Heart pounding in her chest, she fumbled with the doorknob, opening easily. Jenna bolted out, still recording as she fled up the stairs. Jenna's breath came in gaps as she stumbled out. She slammed the basement door and gathering her thoughts. The figure's laugh still echoed in her ears as its glowing eyes burned into her soul. "God, help me," Jenna whispered. She scrolled through her phone, her fingers barely able to press the buttons. She found the number she was looking for. "Hello? Maggie," Jenna said, frantic. "It's Jenna. I need your help." "What's wrong?" Maggie asked. "This house is possessed," Jenna cried. "I need a priest. Now!" There was silence for a moment. "Seriously?" "Yes, Maggie, seriously." "Okay," Maggie said. "I know someone, Father Michael. He does exorcisms. I'll call him and send him to you." "Thank you," Jenna said, her voice breaking. "Hang in there, Jenna. He'll be there soon." Jenna hung up, sinking to the floor, her back against the front door. She tried to steady her breathing, but the fear clung to her. She waited, every odd creak making her jump. It felt like hours. But finally, there was a knock at the door. Jenna opened it to find a middle-aged man in a black shirt and white collar. He held a small, worn leather case. "Father Michael?" Jenna asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," he replied. "Maggie said you needed help." "Yeah," Jenna said, closing the door behind him. "Tell me everything," Jenna explained, her voice trembling. Father Michael listened intently. "Exorcisms aren't to be taken lightly. They can be dangerous," he said. "I can't live here knowing that things here." Father Michael nodded. "Let's begin the ritual." Jenna swallowed and nodded. He opened his leather case, revealing a crucifix, holy water, and a worn prayer book. He handed Jenna the vial of holy water. "Keep this with you," he instructed, "for protection." Jenna nodded, taking the vial with shaky hands as they descended the steps. "Et ne nos induca in tentationem." The airworm in the temptation. Basement changed as the priest started chanting, the Latin words echoing off the cold, damp walls. Jenna clung to the holy water he had given her. "Sed libera nos a malo." The temperature dropped as cold swept through the basement. Jenna shivered, feeling the icy breath of the unseen entity. The shadows grew darker. A deafening roar erupted, shaking the walls as dust and debris rained down. A force slammed into them, sending them sprawling. The air crackled with energy. "Sancte Michael Arcangele," the priest gasped. "Defende nos in proelio." The air pressed in, then released outwards as the house exploded. Coming to, Jenna found herself on the cold basement floor. She groaned, every muscle aching. The priest lay a few feet away, stirring. Jenna looked around in shock. The house was gone. Debris scattered in all directions. They were in the center of what had been the basement, now a barren slab exposed to the sky. As she stood, her gaze fell on words in the concrete. Squinting, she moved closer. They knelt to examine an inscription deeply carved into the concrete. "It's an explanation," the priest said. "This slab of concrete, it's covering the pit of the abyss of Satan and the other fallen angels." The priest leaned in, squinting at the foreign language beneath, the English inscription. "This is ancient Hebrew," he says. "It's the seal of God that keeps the fallen angels from being released." "Look," Jenna said, pointing at the center of the seal. "It's cracking." A small crack appeared in the center, widening slowly. The priest's face turned ashen as it grew like a spider web, expanding, jagged lines splintering outward, accompanied by guttural groans. The ground shuddered, throwing them off balance. "We have to get out of here!" the priest shouted. "Now!" The concrete buckled as the crack grew wider. They stumbled backward, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Putrid, sulfuric stench wafted up from the cracks. Jenna's eyes filled with tears as she clung to the priest. "What have we done?" the priest shouted. "It's going to break open any second. Hell's about to be released. Literally." She looked up at the hole's edge, now seemingly miles above them, the walls steep and crumbling. "Over here," the priest said. He pointed to a section where the ground seemed more stable, a narrow ledge that might offer a chance to climb. Jenna nodded, and they made their way towards it. Each step, a battle against the shifting earth. Jenna slipped, but she clawed at the wall with her free hand, finally pulling herself back onto the ledge. Safely out of the hole, Jenna's eyes drifted over the debris, landing on the house plaque. All she could read was B, C, Y. As most of the letters were covered in soot and grime. "Oh my God," Jenna said, trembling. It was a warning. Be careful what you wish for. She saw her and the priest's vehicles still intact. She scrambled to her feet, pulling the priest up. They stumbled across the debris. She fumbled with her keys, finally sliding the key into the door. She slid into the seat, but before shutting the door, she felt a coldness touch her leg. Jenna, frozen with fear, felt the ice worm up her leg and into her belly, paralyzing her. It spread through her body, mind, and soul. Jenna watched the priest's car fishtail out of the driveway. A slow smile crept across her face. Only a matter of time now. Her voice no longer recognizable. Tallow. I spotted the village from the train window. It emerged from gray fields, its houses crooked upon the short slope of a hillside. Tallow, that was its name, possessed a certain genius, as if it longed to be forgotten. A manor, with its many wings and porticos, loomed over the houses from the hill's peak. There were few signs of life when I exited the train. No one walked the streets, and all the curtains were closed. It stunk of old cabbages and sulfur. In the distance, children played, but no school or playground existed in the village. The hotel keeper was asleep when I entered, her chin slumped upon her chest. A pair of reading glasses, hanging from a string of pearl-like beads, rested upon her chest. I felt rude ringing the bell, but even when I did, it took several trills until she woke up. She weighed me with a single glance. "You're the guest," she said. "I should hope so," I said. Immediately, I regretted the joke. She slid the key across the reception desk with disdain. "There's no breakfast now," she said. "You'll have to wait till later if you want to eat anything." In the lobby, the rack was dense with coats and hats. Boots lined up alongside the wall. Despite this, while climbing the stairs and searching through the labyrinthine corridors for my room, I heard no one. Aside from myself, the hotel was unoccupied. My room was the bare minimum. A single bed, a wardrobe for 3 shirts, at best, and a portrait, sun-stained, of some once green forest. I had come away to write, and for the first 3 mornings, this was what I did. After consuming a breakfast of runny eggs and bacon, cooked up reluctantly by the hotel keeper, I came upstairs and sat for an hour at my desk, doing little of anything, before heading out for a walk. Usually, I would arrive back in time for lunch. Then I would try again to write, fail, somehow more miserably, and head out for yet another walk. At first, my walks avoided the manor on the hill. I walked instead through the dead fields surrounding Tallow, seeing little more than a few bony horses and the occasional abandoned tractor. A drought had been scouring the south for some months. Occasionally, in the far distance, you would see someone standing outside their house, hands on hips, looking towards the cloudless sky. It seemed you could not get away from the manor wherever you walked. Its windows followed you across fields and into woods, over streams and up hills. As time wore on, my walks seemed to draw closer to it, until I trespassing upon the grounds themselves. Once, just once, I spotted the groundskeeper, a huge man, a whole head taller than me, with a bag of suet over his shoulder. He nodded with a gnarled intensity and dumped down the bag. I hurried on. "Who owns the house on the hill?" I asked the hotel keeper one morning. She frowned and placed down the breakfast. Then she sat opposite me, as if this question could not be answered standing. "That's the Macintoshes," she said. "Rufus, Cordelia, I forget the names of the twins. What do they do?" "They own Tallow," she said. "The town?" "Yes." At night, I began to hear the growl of a motor car. It started in the distant hills, grew closer and closer, then ripped past the window and howled off into the night. The sound seemed larger than the village itself, as if I could place my arm out of the window and feel the very air vibrating. I soon found myself waiting for it by the window. I finally spotted the car on the fourth night, its headlights beaming down through the country lanes like twin stars before illuminating the village in sheer white light. It sped past, a dark green beetle of a car, its hood down, and its driver guiding it confidently, almost arrogantly, with a single hand, his other splayed across the passenger seat. "Who was that?" I asked the hotel keeper after returning from my walk the next day. "Rufus," she said, and shook her head as if I should know this by now. "He's in one of those moods." The hotel possessed a single cramped bar, really no more than a cupboard stocked with alcohol. The hotel keeper would stand in there usually from 3 until 5, and then again from 7 until 9. I came in from my walk, and for once, she was not alone. A voice filled with the hearty opulence of the British countryside filled the room. "A guest," it said. "My boy, come into the light. Let's get a look at you. We haven't seen a guest in years." The voice belonged to a man sitting before a glass of whiskey. He smiled broadly, revealing graying gums and a vast set of crooked, yellowing teeth. He had on a tweed waistcoat, its top sprinkled with dandruff. Almost immediately, I did not want to be in his company. "What brings you to Tallow?" he said. "I came to write," I said. I hated that I said this, but something about his manner meant I could not lie. "Excellent," he said. "Most excellent. You will return to the city with many splendid poems detailing our beautiful town, its beautiful countryside, its..." I waited, but he said no more. "Certainly," I said at last. He smiled, clenching his teeth together so that they may be admired. "I won't detain you long," he said. "The muse calleth, the blank page beckon. All of that, thank you," I said, and turned to go. He held up a finger. "There is one more thing, if I can say, and this will be awfully forward of me. But you look to have the most wonderfully soft hands. It would be a pleasure to me if I could touch them." I remained in the doorway. "Come on," he said. "Come closer." Something in me, politeness, let's call it, compelled me across the room. I held out my hand to him. He took a sip of whiskey and placed the glass meaningfully down. Then he leaned close to inspect my hands. The dim lights shone upon his moist lips. With calloused fingertips, he traced slow, gut-wrenching circles across my palm. "Yes," he said, "lovely." He pushed my hand back towards me, as if returning it. "Thank you," he said, and he gave me one last awful look at his teeth to remember him. "It's Rufus McIntosh, by the way," he said, as if I had not already sensed this fact. In my room, I ran my hand under hot water and scrubbed it with soap until it began to ache. No matter how long I worked for, I could not seem to get it clean. I noticed on the doorsteps of the village a set of tawny, whittled dolls. Many wore dresses or waistcoats. I expected the children of the village, who, still, I could hear playing in the distance, would steal these dolls. But that did not appear to occur. At the hotel, the keepers had a tiny straw bonnet, which she adjusted so it sat askew on the doll's head. A day after I met Rufus McIntosh in the hotel bar, I discovered a crow outside of my door. Dead, obviously, with both wings removed and crammed into a shoebox. The scent of rotting flesh had penetrated my room while I wrote. When I finally stepped outside, the stench overwhelmed me, and I hurled my guts into the toilet bowl. Downstairs, when I had finally gathered myself, I told the hotel keeper about the bird I had found. I tossed the shoebox onto the counter. She eyed it with a certain melancholy. "That can't be helped," she said. "Can't be helped? What do you mean it can't be helped?" "It's just part of it." "Part of what?" "Tallow." She took the shoebox and placed it under the desk. She sighed. "I suppose you'll be wanting a discount." Nothing I wrote seemed to stick. If I wrote a sentence in the morning, I would return in the afternoon and find the words jumbled. But always when I sat down at my desk, it seemed as if I were seeing things truly for the first time, my pen moving rapidly across the paper, solving issues of consciousness and mortality with a few pithy phrases. I was enjoying my work, perhaps for the first time ever, but it seemed all I was producing was nonsense. I still went for walks. Often I saw Rufus on the balcony, looking up towards the sky, attempting, it seemed, to make the heavens open through willpower alone. If he spotted me, he raised his hand in greeting and smiled. Even from some distance, I could make out his teeth. The invitation was for dinner. That night, 7 o'clock. "Bring some poetry, boy," it said in blue ink scrawled beneath the address. "Regale us." "You won't be needing supper then," the hotel keeper said when she delivered it. By the time the appointed hour came round, I was dressed in my best outfit and waiting in the hotel lobby. It felt excessively hot, and I could not get comfortable in the chair. I felt I should have left the village of Tallow at that moment and headed back to the city. But I stayed, stupidly, rashly, believing I would get some answers. I heard the purr of Rufus's motor car approaching through the country lanes. He entered the lobby, beaming. "Come on, old chap," he said. "Supper's waiting." Outside, his car puttered on the driveway. The interior was flaking leather. Rufus climbed in after me. "Let's hit the road," he said, and wrenched the mighty gear lever into position. The car growled beneath his feet. Before I could adjust my seatbelt, I was thrust back into the seat as the car hurtled on towards the hill. Houses, bushes, trees, all streamed past. The wind cut viciously into my eyes. I glanced at Rufus. Tears streamed from his eyes, but he seemed to take a sinister delight in the pain. over the howl of the engine, Rufus shouted, "Sorry about the short notice, my boy, but I heard soon you'd be leaving us. I thought you may as well see the manor before you go." "Thank you," I said. "What? Thank you." He cranked the gear lever once again, and with a crunching shift of his feet, the car shifted in speed and momentum to get careen around a corner. I was almost thrown through the window. "Almost there," he shouted. True enough. We arrived. The car crunching across the gravel, spitting stones from the wheels. The final stop jolted me towards the dashboard. My heart was hammering, my vision blurry. Already, he was ushering me out. "Come on," he said, glancing up at the sky. No time to waste. Cordelia awaited in a long, poorly lit room. At a table spanning almost its entire length, she sat near its head, her wheelchair pressed up against the wood, an empty plate before her. She was veiled and wore a black lace dress, incredibly intricate. Her white silk gloves, like a pair of snake skins, sat beside the plate. Rufus came over and touched his lips to his hand. "A delight," she said, when I entered, and held out a hand for me to kiss. I could not see her face, so I could not tell her expression. But I bent to her hand and touched my lips to it. She was freezing. Her skin tasted like moss. "Please," she said, "take a seat." They sat me at the head of the table. When the first course arrived, toast with pâté, they paused, both of them, to see how I would eat it. After I began scraping the paste across the toast, they shared a look, as if to confirm something. And then they too began spreading pâté upon their toast. "Rufus tells me that you are a writer," Cordelia said. "That is true. A fiction writer?" "Yes," I said. "He's really very good," Rufus said, mouthful, flecks of toast on his teeth. "I have read all of his books. I, of course, had never published a book. In truth, I was a really very unsuccessful writer. It was, at best, a hobby to me." "You have the right shape of cranium for it," Cordelia said. "And you have inquisitive eyes. I suspect you are rather good at water sports as well." I did not know if that was true or not. Rufus gave a little chuckle. "This is my wife," he said. "A scientist, always working away in her laboratory, tinkering, delving deep. Truly, it is all beyond me." "I must read your earlobe," she said. I suspected it was perhaps the wine and a slightly empty stomach. But this idea, which normally would have filled me with horror, felt sound. Before I knew it, the second course was arriving. It was mozzarella and tomatoes. But the tomatoes were unripe and gave way with soggy ease. When I ate them, I am too polite, they had already turned tart. The mozzarella I dared not touch. This did not stop the Macintoshes devouring their meal, though. They ate as if they had been starving for days, often foregoing their knives and forks and using their hands to push the food into their mouths. Come the end of the course, Rufus had tomato juice down his chin, and the hands of Cordelia were spotted with food. "Your earlobe?" Cordelia said, tapping on the table. "I wish to inspect it." "My apologies," Rufus said. "I suspect this is all a ruse. I told her you had the most perfectly soft hands." I laid my cheek upon the table. She wished to look at the right earlobe. The left, she said, was often a liar. I felt safe doing this for some reason. It was around then that I noticed I felt entirely safe altogether, that the feelings of anxiety and turmoil that had accompanied me prior to the trip had dissipated, that, in fact, the anxiety and turmoil that had haunted my whole life had flown away as well. I focused upon the fingers tracing my ear and felt almost bliss. I smiled at Rufus, and he smiled back, innocently back. "You are beginning to enjoy it then," he said. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." It was at that moment that Cordelia leaned suddenly forward and, clamping her teeth forcefully down on my ear. Before I could speak, she'd bitten through the bone and swallowed it whole. I passed out. How could you not? When I woke, my left ear was gone. A patch of bloody flatness remained. They stored me in the barn, alone. Once a day, the groundskeeper arrived with my feed. He pushed the bucket through the feed slot and waited for me to eat, sitting, smoking, watching. When I was done, he took the bucket. He felt sorry for me, he said, his voice a low growl. "Then let me out," I said, but he shook his head. "In time," he said. "A few moons." He looked skywards, nodded once. In the nights, I dug at the ground to the back of my cell. The dirt was dry and rough. After an hour, my hands were bloody from the effort. I lost nails, turned my hands black, but did not stop digging. Eventually, I was able to tunnel under the boundary wall, pull myself under and out. A pair of purple bruises, shaped like kidneys, still adorn my hips. I fled into the night. Though tallow glowered below, I did not trust the locals any longer. I found safety in the trunk of a fallen tree and sheltered there for a night. They hunted me, Rufus's motor car tearing through the countryside, its lights emerging over the crests of hills and sending a searching white cone into the darkness. I emerged come dawn, lacking sleep, and hobbled on, my stomach growling. Eventually, I came to a new town, a new hotel, and managed to persuade them to let me stay. How disheveled I must have looked standing in their foyer, with my ear lost and my clothes bloodied. They provided me with a small, ill-outfitted room. That night, in the cramped confines of a single bed, I heard the howling of the car again. I left, once again, before dawn. It went like this for several days, me finding some place to camp, Rufus pursuing. I was heading, vaguely, for London. Still am, really. Though there is no knowing of when I shall arrive, given my kinking and arduous passage through the quiet country towns. There have been times when Rufus has grown close. I have spotted his car outside of various hotels, parked on the roadside gates while he stalks across an empty field. I know, inevitably, he will catch me. When, however, is undetermined. Despite this, every night I dream of tallow. Not nightmares, but a kind of strange nostalgic reverie. I wonder if there is a part of me that wishes to be caught. Perhaps there is that part in all of us. Perhaps that is why, an hour or so before bed, I unlatch the window and leave it open. Just a crack, just an inch, so that while I sleep, anyone may enter.